Hello and welcome to the Pleasurepreneur podcast. This podcast will help you create what you desire in your business with pleasure. Whether that be calling in your ideal clients, making more money, or creating a balanced business life blend. I'm your host, Regan, pleasure and business coach, published author of A Mother's Pleasure, wife and mama to 3 little wildlings. However you're choosing to listen to this podcast, ask yourself, how can I make this more pleasurable? And do just that. I acknowledge the custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded and produced, the Wadi Wadi people of Dharawal land. Now, let's proceed with pleasure. Hello and welcome back to the Pleasurepreneur podcast. We are almost at the end of 5 Days of Fire, and it has been such a great week. The coaching and the conversations that have gone down this week have been so ridiculously relevant and practical and simple to remove the shit we do not need to achieve what we really want in business. I've left a short audio training in there every day this week, and then everyone inside has been able to ask specific questions related to the trainings, to share what their specific challenges are and get personalized coaching to overcome those challenges in really tangible, ease-filled ways. And aside from the 5 bite-sized trainings, I've coached the women inside on things like creating energetic consistency so that they can break the pattern of, throwing themselves all in and then pulling back and never quite completing the thing or reaching the goal. We have had conversations on how to achieve your goals without procrastination dragging it out, on finding the opposite of the juggle in their life and business, on resolving conflict between short-term pleasure and long-term desires, and a conversation I am expanding on and bringing here today, the real reason to raise your prices, which we'll get into in a sec. But first, if you missed out and still want to join 5 Days of Fire, you absolutely can. I'm going to keep this container open for you to join until Friday, October 31. You can binge the free daily trainings and the coachings up until then. And if you're inside, you then have the chance to get coached by me on our coaching call on October 31 for a heavily discounted investment of just over $100. So click the link in the show notes. The trainings in Telegram are free, as I said. And if you are a 5 Days of Fire participant, you have the option for the coaching call upgrade. Okay, so let's dive in to start talking about raising our prices. This is something that came up in 5 Days of Fire, as I said, which also comes up all the time in my coaching containers, where my clients really want to be making way more money with way more pleasure, and that conversation is all about increasing your prices. Specifically, I want to talk about the real value that is added when you do increase your prices and what happens when you put off raising your prices when you have the desire to, and also how your clients benefit from you increasing your prices. One of the women inside 5 Days of Fire said, I'm going to paraphrase, but she said some version of this. She said, I'm planning to raise my prices significantly, yay. But there's this voice in my head saying these aren't super popular programs anyway. Why would I charge more? And then she kind of said, I'd charge more because they're worth it. And yeah, that's true, right? There is value in the work that she's doing and in the program she's offering. I wanted to add something deeper. Something that most people don't talk about, because there's a kind of value that is created simply by increasing your prices. So let's talk about the old story about adding more value. Yeah, you've probably heard this before. If you want to charge more, you need to add more value. So we start thinking, I will add more coaching calls, I'll add more bonuses, more resources, more time. Basically a whole lot more bells and whistles, right? Because we assume that the only way to justify a higher price is by adding more stuff. But here's what I want to share with you today, and what I shared inside 5 Days of Fire, and what I want you to consider, right? The value doesn't just increase because of what you add. It increases because of who you become in order to increase the price. Let me say that again. The value doesn't just increase because of what you add. It increases because of who you become in order to increase the price. The shift in identity required for you to raise your prices and say them out loud and sell them at that new price is the value that is added, right? So imagine that you aren't even adding anything more, like my client in 5 Days of Fire. Like, she already knows her programs are really valuable. They're worth it. She wants to increase their prices. She does not need to add any more bells and whistles. Once she increases the price, that is going to then require a shift in her identity, which therefore increases the value of her offer, right? Like, let's play a little game to hit this home. One that we've actually played before on the pod in I think it was called Stronger Than Strategy episode. So I'll add that into the show notes for you. Now, imagine your current offer, like whatever that is, whatever. If you've got more than one, like consider your signature offer or the main one that you would like your clients to buy from you. Now, I want you to add a 0 to the end of your price. Or like if you charge commission percentage, like some of my clients, bump that percentage way up, right? If I tell you, like, this is what I want you to do today, you're going to go onto your website and you're going to add a 0 on or increase your percentage commission, etc. How does that feel? Notice what happens in your body. Notice what happens in your brain. Like, what's your mind saying? Do you feel a little flutter or a wobble? Maybe even like some full body contraction, or your brain saying some version of like, well, who the hell am I to charge that? You know, if that's the case, then perfect. Like, this is the real work, because increasing your prices doesn't just bring up strategy questions. It brings up identity questions. Not what do I need to add to charge that price, but who do I need to become in order to charge that price? It invites you to look at the places where you still play small, where you don't quite believe in yourself 100%, where you think you don't know enough, or you undervalue your work, where you people please, or where you feel as though you aren't deserving, or you feel like you aren't enough. If you were to raise your prices, to add a 0 to the end, consider this. How would you be showing up differently? What might change in your life? Who is the version of you who charges those prices? And what is different about her? Like, what's the difference between who you are now and who you are when you're charging those prices? Therein lies the value gap between what you're charging now and what you want to be charging. You don't need to add more calls, more modules, more time. In fact, I'm just thinking we don't want to add more time anyway, because if you're helping someone create a result, do you really want to drag out the length of time it takes to help them create that result? I don't even think that is a value add a lot of the time, if you're helping them to create a specific result. You do not need more bells and whistles. You need to become the woman, the man, the person who charges those kind of prices. Perhaps the person who believes in herself a hell of a lot more, who recognizes how life-changing her work is, who is more organized or more trusting of herself, or who is more supported, who has more energy. When you decide to charge more, you have to expand into a new level of self-concept. One that says some version of my time, my energy, my expertise are precious and really fucking valuable. And my clients are getting access to transformation, not just time on a Zoom call. This is why raising prices can feel really uncomfortable, because your nervous system is being asked to hold more. And because your nervous system knows that you're changing, I don't want to say upgrading, but you're becoming a more embodied, enhanced, stronger self-belief version of you. Yeah. And that's scary for your nervous system to know that change is imminent. So yeah, this is why raising your prices can feel really uncomfortable. Your nervous system is asking you to hold more. Your nervous system is noticing that, you're going to be transforming and changing, and that you are required to hold more, more money, more responsibility, more leadership, ultimately more power. That's the true identity shift that happens when you raise your prices. And that's the work we do in coaching. That's some of the mindset work. It's the identity and embodiment work that we do. It's not logistical. It is energetic. As I said, put a 0 on the end. It's not difficult. The difficulty comes with the identity shifting. This is the work I help my clients with. This is what we'd started to dive into with 5 Days of Fire. This is where the value add lies. The real value increase does not come from adding more bells and whistles, unless, of course, you really know that you need them. And then, of course, that's a different kind of conversation. That's just I need to make my prices match my offering, right? So as I said, the real value increase doesn't come from adding more bells and whistles. It comes from who you have to become to hold that new level. When you raise your prices, you raise your standards, not just for your clients, but for yourself. Yeah? I'll share with you about the last time I raised my prices. The last time I raised my prices, I realized 2 things needed to be enhanced. The version of me who charges the higher rate is always fully supported, and she's also got her shit together more at home, which sounds kind of weird, but look, I'll expand a bit more as I share this story, right? So I knew that I had this desire to increase my price a certain amount, right? But I realized, in order to become congruent and in alignment with that price, this was the value gap for me. I needed to get my shit together more at home, and I needed to ensure that I was fully supported. So one of the things I did was I re-signed with my mentor for a whole nother 10 months. I did not go the optional 5, I took it to 10, right? Not because I couldn't do it alone, but because I knew that the version of me who leads at that level of my new price increase never goes without mentorship, right? She doesn't try to hold everything herself. She doesn't isolate. She invests at the level she sells at because she knows support expands her capacity to serve and lead and receive, right? Now, I feel like that decision alone was thousands of dollars a month decision because of who it has called me into becoming. Yeah. And because I wasn't just the coach who, just charged more, I was the coach who embodied what I teach. And I also had this realization where I had to get into integrity with who I was being at home to be aligned with the person I am in my business. As I said, it's kind of random. So in business, I had my systems, my clients, my results, all of that was quite strong, right? But at home, things sometimes felt a little chaotic or a lot chaotic, and when my kids were really little, that was totally fine. I actually had to really lower my expectations, my standards when I had 3 kids, 4 and under. And it was the standard that really made sense for that season, right? But as they were a little older and I had a little more space in my days, I actually felt called to bring the same level of integrity and intentionality into my home life too. So it sounds kind of unrelated, but that's what came up for me when I considered who do I actually need to become in order to increase my prices? I need to know that I'm fully supported, and I feel like I need to be a lot more well-rounded with getting my shit together. I need to be more organized at home, have things in place, get some systems operating, up the bar there, It sounds like it's unrelated, but it is all related. It's all about identity. And the version of me who charges more is also the version of me who is calm and clear and a little bit more organized and, steady in every part of my life. Now, that is congruence, and that is what actually increases the value, not because I added more, but because of who I became. When you feel the desire to raise your prices, you're actually being called to become more congruent and aligned in your life. And your clients, they don't just feel it, they actually benefit from it. That is the value that's created when you grow into the woman who charges higher prices. I had this realization in the past. It was something kind of wild that when I was charging less, I was actually underserving my clients. So they were getting a version of me that didn't back herself, trust herself, or, hold herself like I do now. The fastest way to becoming that woman, the one who fully stands behind her work, to charge those prices is to let yourself raise your prices and grow into her. So next time you think about increasing your prices, Maybe you're there right now. Maybe you're like, oh, I do want to increase my prices. I have the desire to increase my prices. Feels a little uncomfortable. We now know why. But I want to remind you, like, don't immediately rush to add more. Yeah? Instead, I want you to ask yourself, who do I need to become to hold this new level? What beliefs need to shift for this to feel safe and true? And what kind of support does this version of me need? Because yes, your work is already valuable. And yes, your results already speak for themselves, but the biggest value increase happens inside of you. And that's the value add that your clients get. I want you to let this episode be your permission slip to let desire lead and to trust that it's guiding you towards the next more elevated, more you version of you that you're here to become. The next evolution of your business doesn't come from adding more. It comes from becoming more you, right? All right. So before we wrap up, if you are really enjoying this kind of conversation, if you know there are things that need to change for you or that you need to burn down in your business to make space for more of what you want, get yourself inside 5 Days of Fire before it closes this week. You're going to walk away feeling lighter and clearer and more powerful, and you'll actually know what to take off your plate to move to where you're headed faster. As I said, it's free to join. The audio replays are waiting for you, and the final coaching call happens this Friday, October 31. So get in before it's gone. The link is in the show notes, and I'm going to catch you here in the next episode. By the way, please come and DM me. Slide into my DMs if you're planning on increasing your prices. I want to celebrate you. All right. Bye for now.